Thinkful, get a job or get your money back. Thinkful is a service that is actually going to teach you how to become a developer. Their programs, unlike coding boot camps that charge a fortune, they don't charge you anything until you actually get a job. Everything is deferred. They're building the world's next workforce, and they're working around your schedule. They have programs in software engineering, data science, product design, data analytics, and product management. So if you guys are looking to break into this industry in a risk-free way, check out Thinkful. The link is in the description tab below. Hey guys, what up? Good evening. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the top 10 web design trends going into 2020. And web design trends are just like design fashion when it comes to clothing. You had Converses that were in style back in the 80s, and they went out of style, and you got made fun of if you wore Converses in the 90s. But then all of a sudden they came back. Same with like bell bottoms and all that stuff. Probably a bad example, but if we bring it to a tech example, when I was first getting started with web development, one of the things that was real hot, and I think it has a lot to do with Apple and their curvature icons that obviously they battled Samsung over for the UX design and look of their little app icons that were rounded corners. That was a relatively, that was like a revolutionary thing at the time. So we had to do all these hacks as web developers using images and like basically these hacks of after tags, because this was before CSS pseudo selectors for like before and after. And we would have to smash like images together to make it look like something had a rounded border. So we really jumped through hoops just to make something look rounded. And then I remember like maybe 3 or 4 years later, it was like rounding sucks. We're going back to the square stuff. Like square is more modern, and like it's just kind of funny. But like design and UX definitely follows trends, and sometimes we kind of go through the same loop. But ultimately, though, this video is going to be about what is popular right now going into 2020. All right, so number 10 on this list is going to be frosted glass and also gradients. Now, frosting the glass or frosted glass, that is that's something I think, like I'm seeing it everywhere. I'm actually seeing it on YouTube now. It seems like once we start saying that this is the direction we want to go, and you can see this thing was actually published a long time ago. So for whatever reason, we've had this capability, but then now people are like, it just makes a lot of sense. And probably a lot of that has to do with literally like user testing. Like you'd be surprised, like sometimes when you think something looks really good and you got this other model that doesn't look as good, and you're like, oh, the customer's definitely going to like the good one. And then you realize like sometimes they like ugly colors, ugly fonts, large fonts, like just weird random things. But anyway, I'm seeing the frosted glass all over the place, and this is definitely a trend that seems to be cropping up. And the reason why is you can just overlay text on top of images or on top of other text, and with the frosted glass background, it really, I think it allows the text to pop out and stand out more so than just the typical gradient. Now, the reason why I also mention gradients is because CSS gradients are something that weren't really possible like 5 years ago or so maybe, but with the modern CSS, you're seeing more gradient backgrounds just through CSS styling. We used to have to do like images in Photoshop, bring the image in. But nowadays we can do all that stuff just simply with CSS, and you're seeing that a lot more these days. All right, so number 9 is going to be large fonts. You're seeing a lot of large fonts, and not just different font families. Large fonts are sometimes, you could see like, it's much more magazine-like, I would say, or billboard. It reminds me of like old school billboards, but these large fonts definitely do have some sort of, I think, draw to them that it seems like most websites are trying to pick up on. Although I will say that these large fonts are really great for like portfolio type sites and things with design, but it would be great for like musical artists and things like that, but it's not great for every type of website. So with these trends, you got to kind of always factor in like, what are you trying to build? Like if you're trying to like have somebody check their bank account, you clearly don't want this type of stuff going on. You know what I mean? Like, so you got to be very picky and choosy when it comes to using large fonts or frosted glass or any of that stuff. But here you can see that you know, fonts really have been given a lot more attention over the last, like, to me it seems like 5 years or so. I don't know how long or how old the Google Fonts library is, but Google has like literally hundreds of different fonts that you can easily just include into your website. The problem is every type of font you bring in, it does slow your overall application down, especially if you're pointing to some sort of CDN. But anyway, large fonts are definitely a UX item for 2020. All right, guys, so the next item on the list is full screen forms. Forms are something that we always have to deal with whenever we have any sort of user-driven data, right? They're submitting some sort of form and they're posting up some data to our server. And a lot of times dealing with forms is one of the most complicated things that web developers actually struggle with and customers struggle with. They don't know what information to fill out, or like they don't know how to fill out the form. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why websites can be complicated depending on the business model. But what we're seeing these days is this trend towards, hey, if we're going to give somebody a form, we want to just basically give them the form and throw it up in front of their face and not have any other text or images or any of the stuff that could be like complicating matters. And this is a good example right here, this Lemonade product that is just simply saying, hey, give us your first and last name. Let's go to the next option. So in addition to the full screen forms, you also have the fact that forms, instead of just giving you a huge drop down list of a bunch of different things you have to fill out, which can be daunting to a customer, giving them one item at a time is sometimes considered to be a better user experience. But I think your mileage will vary depending on the type of product that you're dealing with. Here's an example of MailChimp that does a sign up form. This is an effective form, I think. Although you can see, obviously, they're trying to throw their logo in there. So, the logo, obviously, I guess they feel that gives the form some more credibility. But then here's another demo of a full screen form that just for a simple login is just not trying to complicate any matters. This is a humongous login for a desktop, obviously. You don't really need that much space. But you might as well not clutter things up as well. A lot of websites, you just have a small little login in the top right corner. But we're definitely seeing this whole full screen forms, just trying to make complicated processes easier. All right, guys, so as I mentioned before, where like we talked about rounding and actual rounding corners and then moving back to the original design, this is taking that into a whole different level. This is the throwback. So one of the trends is actually to do more of a retro approach to web design. And in this case, this is, I think, a cool little CSS framework that allows you to make user interfaces that look just like the old Nintendo Entertainment System. So this goes back all the way to the 80s. And again, this probably takes retro to a whole new level. But retro design in general is a web design trend that we've seen lately. And I think that we're going to continue to see that moving forward. All right, another interesting trend that I'm starting to see is the hand-drawn CSS. So we're starting to actually get not just hand-drawn CSS, but we're getting actual frameworks built so that you can build your entire user interface in these hand-drawn type of look and feel. And this stuff integrates very well with React libraries. And I'm not really sure how practical this is in the long run, but I do find it to be somewhat of an interesting fad. All right, the next trend is going to be something that's been around for a little while, but it's something that we're seeing a lot more often these days, and that is using animated GIFs to give instructions. So I'm seeing it a lot with actual programming. This is how you fill out a form. This is how you do this or that. And they're just simple images that are all put together using the GIF format. And it allows you to save a lot of time. Then instead of having to embed a video or link to some sort of video or something, it's just simply an image that can sit inside your web page. And where it used to be really size constraints kind of kept us from doing this in the past. But these days, through mobile networks being faster, 4G, 5G, obviously, most people have Wi-Fi and things like that. So the ability to use these as short examples of how to do something is something I'm seeing a lot more often these days. All right, so the next one is going to be interactive charts. We've had the ability to display tabular data inside of an HTML table for a long time. And still, if you're going to be displaying tabular data, it's probably good to use a table. But these days, there's no reason why you can't have pie charts and interactivity to all your different charts. And it's easier than it's ever been to create things like line charts, like I said, pie charts. This Nevo Rocks project is a React project that will basically tell you exactly how to lay out your data so that you can get visualization through these different types of charts. And just being able to visualize and interact with data is much more, you're going to get much better processing out from your end users who have like an actual interactive chart to look off of and play around with, especially if what you're trying to convey is something database or data driven. So in the past, these types of things were very, very difficult with D3, but luckily due to React and other client side component libraries, these things are much, much easier these days. All right, number 3 is going to be voice recognition. This is something that, according to Google, by next year, by the end of next year, they anticipate that 30% of all their searches are going to be done verbally. So people asking their phone for something, speaking in to search for something, but taking it to a whole nother level when it comes to people with disabilities, to be able to interact with a website through voice commands. We're seeing it on our TVs, obviously, Google Home, Google Alexa, all this different stuff. But now websites have voice recognition APIs that are out there that are being mandated, not just for disabilities, but also just to make your website more accessible. The idea is that voice recognition is going to be able to do things like filling out forms and a lot of that other repetitive stuff that we're normally used to using a keyboard to do. There's an entire web speech API that you can see was just recently updated on September 30th of 2019. There was also recently a landmark Supreme Court ruling against Domino's Pizza, who had about 1,500 restaurants also trying to help them against a lawsuit that was being filed against them by, I believe it was a deaf person or a blind person who couldn't, I think it was a blind person, but they couldn't use their website, so it was not something that a screen reader was able to properly use so that they could actually interact with their site, and they got sued for that. Netflix also once got sued for not providing closed caption for people that were deaf. So being able to make your websites accessible is something that we're going to have a lot more worry about, I think, as we move into the future, to make sure not just, like I said, people with disabilities, but just overall that the website is as easy to use as possible. And then the voice recognition and voice interaction being 30% of search volume kind of reminds me of like when people first talked about mobile apps are going to be, the predominant thing that people are searching or interacting with. For some reason, I couldn't really fathom that when mobile apps were first just, coming about, 2008, 2009, 2010 even. I don't think I was on board with, I just kept thinking, well, there's no way people are going to use their phone for everything. But even somebody like me, I probably spend half my time on my phone. So there's just no question. This reminds me of that, though, that more and more people are going to be turning to this voice recognition. All right, so number 2 is going to be video overlays. And I know that we went into that trend where you would have your banner, your typical Jumbotron header that you always saw on most Bootstrap websites. And a lot of people were replacing that with a video that runs in the background. And we've seen that for a couple years. A lot of people really hate that. But that is continuing to be the trend when it's done right. This is an example of just injecting video as you're scrolling. So this type of interactivity, I know that there's a lot going on here, but when you're trying to convey something, it is pretty interesting. It's my computer's glitching a little bit because of the screen capture. But anyway, I find it pretty fascinating the way that this is working. And depending on the site and what you're trying to convey, this type of design is definitely able to pop more than just your standard text and things like that. So you could even see that I'm interacting over top of the video through overlays, text overlays over top of the videos. And anyway, you could just do a ton with that. All right, guys, and number 1 on this list is going to be WebGL, 3D modeling, video gaming, virtual reality, augmented reality. All that stuff is made possible through something called WebGL. It allows the browser to communicate with your graphics card. That is obviously an interactive website using WebGL, where I can just navigate around. It's got sounds going on in the background. this is the type of stuff that I want to see more of, and it's one of the reasons we haven't been able to do this is because JavaScript is simply not fast enough. So that's what WebAssembly is going to do. It's going to make JavaScript about 3 times as fast, in some cases a lot faster than that. But it will allow us to do a lot more than what we can currently do. But what we can currently do is pretty cool. Like, this isn't even the best example, to be honest with you. Here's an example of a shoe company that's using virtual reality, or not really virtual reality. In this case, it's just a 3D type of an experiment using WebGL, but they're trying to sell shoes here, and I'm using the mouse wheel to be able to scroll in and out of this little wormhole. So I think we have some room for improvement. Like something like this, I think is just a little bit too difficult to deal with. But this part's kind of cool. Like you get through the wormhole and you can start interacting with things. That's actually pretty sweet. All right, I take it back. This website's pretty sweet. So like this type of stuff I find to be more interesting. With things like React Native, Flutter, we can put on a virtual reality headset and we can actually see stuff like this in actual fully immersed 3D virtual reality. So anyway, let's continue to move in that direction. In my opinion, that's why I have it number 1 on this list. And I think WebAssembly is going to do big things for gaming and, like I said, the augmented reality, virtual reality future of web design. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of this list. Make sure you subscribe to my newsletter. The link is in the description tab below. Also, if you guys could vote up, like it, comment it, subscribe, do all that stuff, it helps me out. And let me know if I missed anything. So I want to hear what your comments are of anything you guys might have heard about that I'm not aware of. And let's just have a discussion. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good night. Bye.